Today is the video over the second page, which is the EOC Important Geographic Events and EOC Important Geographic Migrations. In your EOC review, you should have a map of both the US and the world. The overall goal is to understand the impact of geographic shifts and be able to label those demographic shifts and their migrations on a map of the US. One of them will be relevant to a map of the world, which is the Panama Canal, but that one you'll need to do on your own. I'm going to do my best to demonstrate where these shifts are located. However, if you have any questions, make sure you bring them up with your teacher in class. So follow along with me on the paper that says EOC Important Geographic Events. It starts with the settlement of the Great Plains. So starting with this event, it says Plains Indians settled here first. The invention of the steel plow made farming easier. The Homestead Act encouraged settlement. For the physical geography, the middle of the country and extreme temperatures and climate. Hot summers, cold winters. It's flat, wide open spaces, which is excellent for farming. So on your US map, how you would locate this is I would draw a large circle around this area of your map. So this is very general, but it's around here. Then what I want you to do is to label this the Great Plains. Moving on, the next one says the Klondike Gold Rush. The Klondike Gold Rush took place in Alaska, so down here on your map. Thousands suffered from an economic depression, left their lives behind in the late 1800s seeking fortunes. Alaska was seen as a large and distant source of raw materials. I tell my students often to remember that this took place in Alaska because it's the Klondike Gold Rush, not named after, but reminding me of Klondike ice cream bars, which are also cold. So we will label Alaska with the Klondike Gold Rush. Okay, the next one is the Panama Canal. This is the one that you're going to have to do on your own. If you flip to the next page, you should have a world map. This says that the U.S. supported the revolution of this country and in exchange was given permission to build the Panama Canal and control a territory 5 miles around it. The U.S. gave back control in the 1990s. The geographic or physical geography for this is 48 miles of international waterways between the Atlantic and Pacific. If you go to your world map, look between North and South America where it gets very skinny, and you should be able to identify the area that would be broken up in what is now the Panama Canal. Next to the Panama Canal, please label yellow fever. The overall problem, or one of the largest problems in its creation, was the spread of yellow fever, which had high fatality rates and was spread mostly by mosquitoes. Moving on with the Dust Bowl, farmers misused their lands with overplanting, not rotating their crops, which is done today, and millions of acres became useless. This was during the Great Depression to make the Great Depression even worse. Years of sustained drought dried up the lands, wind carried clouds of dust and sand. You should have reviewed this during your Great Depression unit. Specifically, the places that were hit the hardest, I would like for you to outline in your map. So this region, and this is very general, right here, is the area that was really hit the hardest by the Dust Bowl. So please also label this Dust Bowl. Even though I haven't labeled it, I need for you to do so. I would also like you to take the time to be sure that you go through and you label these states. You can reference a map that you find online, but it is important for you to know that general geography as well. The next one says the levee failure in New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina. It talks about the engineering failure, the wind and storm surge at high tides. The levee failure that it's referring to is predominantly in the areas that were below sea level. And that's this area roughly right here. Next to this, please label levee failure Hurricane Katrina. Also, you're going to want to label these states down here, be able to identify where Louisiana is located on a map. Moving on for the important geographic migrations. For these, I'm going to do my best to include arrows to show you where people moved, but you're going to have to do a lot of this and work hard to get this done on your own, or you may need to look up material online. The first one is the Great Migration. African Americans moved north and west to seek employment opportunities in industrial cities. Specifically, what I would like for you to do is label from Louisiana out to Los Angeles, which is roughly here. That is one great movement with the Great Migration. Other movements include from Louisiana to San Francisco, from Mississippi to St. Louis, and please label the cities that I'm saying as well. From Alabama, let's do that one first, to Chicago. From Georgia to Detroit. From Georgia to New York. From South Carolina to Philadelphia. And another great one is from South Carolina to Washington, D.C. Once again, make sure that you actually label the cities that I said as I went and the states where they came from. Overall, here is your Great Migration. You can put these in a different color if you like, label it off to the side that these are all Great Migration shifts. For the next one, Western expansionism. The idea behind this was manifest destiny, that the United States was given, or I should say America was given from sea to sea by God. It was manifest, it was our destiny. The West is often seen as an area rich with opportunity, new beginnings, and this goes back to overcrowding in cities, lack of jobs, financial distress, and so on. The government helped people through Western expansionism with the Homestead Act. So really off to the top, I think, is the best place to do an arrow, just moving out west. I would also label it here and say Western expansion, manifest destiny, and put a year in there as well, 1800s to early 1900s. So label that next to your arrow, moving out west. Rural to urban, the movement from rural areas to urban centers began with industrialization. Urbanization had many consequences that you're responsible for understanding. Safe, adequate, affordable housing, but also led to just general Overcrowding would lead to poor sanitation, environmental issues, pollution, and so on. So how I would like for you to label that is I have it right next to New York City here. I put a picture of a garbage pail, so please do the same. And then right off to the side of that, please write urbanization. Oops, let me pause this just for a moment here. Okay, I have my garbage can now. Be sure that you label urbanization and put that it occurred during the 1900s. Our last one, the Rust Belt to the Sun Belt. Areas like Detroit, Michigan, Indiana, which had been centers for American industry. They were built on coal, iron, steel, saw huge losses of population when factories closed. People began to move south to the Sun Belt. So what I would like for you to do is to draw an arrow distinguishing, first of all, where the Sun Belt is. So I'm just going to draw a line across the bottom here to indicate where the Sun Belt would be located. And then I also want you to include where the Rust Belt is. So I'm going to do a circle here. It goes from about Illinois up until Pennsylvania and generally covers this area here. Be sure that you label this Rust Belt, this Sun Belt, and then draw an arrow moving south. A great example of this is currently people moving down south for job opportunities more in this time and age. So going back to our objectives then, understand the impact of geographic shifts, label the demographic events and migrations. Coming into class then, you should have your map completely outlined as I instructed you to do. You should also have your world map, including the Panama Canal.